Welcome everybody to yet another episode of Covenant Connections with me, Ariel, and my main man, Bill. How you doing, my friend?
Good, Ariel. It's been a good week. You had a
It's been a
crazy week
good.
with your son, though, in the hospital,
Yes,
and
yes,
it's all
indeed,
good now.
indeed. But what I'm happy about is that we're getting more and more comments on our videos, which is quite exciting. One of which specifically asked us to address the subject of weddings, both LDS and Jewish weddings and commonalities and differences. This will be pretty cool to discuss, I would
It
say.
will.
All right.
It will
So
be.
so let's dive into this just a second. And there's a verse in the Bible. In Hebrew, it says, "V'azav ish et aviv et imo v'davak beishto." The literal translation says, and it's in the book of Genesis, by the way, since we're already focused on the book of Genesis. It says, "A man shall." The literal translation. Maybe we can find it, and you'll tell me what's written in there. The literal translation says, "A man will part from his father and mother and cling to his wife." That came out even better than what I imagined when I
Yeah, it's
translated it.
actually very, very close to the English translation.
Really?
Like,
Tell me what it
if I,
says. Does it say
if I remember
cling?
correctly, I'm gonna quote it from my head, and we can look it up. But in my head, it's, "Therefore shall a man leave his father and basically take a wife and cleave unto her." Right? So we can find that exact verse. I don't remember which chapter it is in.
I think, yeah. Well, if I recall correctly, it's in Genesis, in the second book. I can quickly find it as well. Um, Verse 24, maybe. Yes.
Therefore shall, therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh.
So let's talk about that specific word, cleave.
Cleave, which normally means to divide.
Really?
Kind of an interesting word, but in this context, it actually means to hold on to and separate from all others, right? So it is a separation like cleave, but it's separating you and the wife from all other.
And it ends with the word, and they become one. What was the ending?
They shall be one flesh.
And they shall be one flesh. Yes, that's actually pretty accurate. So in Hebrew, the word cleave, the original word says davak. Davak, devek in Hebrew means glue. Davak
That makes
is
more sense.
yeah, it's basically glued to his wife. But I have to tell you, talk about weddings. This was the verse that was on our wedding invitation. Me and my wife. This was the verse that was on our wedding invitation. Um, and yeah, it's pretty nice. So let's talk a bit about some of the traditions in an ordinary, I would say. So obviously, Judaism is a spectrum. I cannot
Yeah.
say there's like one type beyond the different aspects of how do you perform the different rituals. There are so many different variations of adherence to how you would commit some sort of a commandment. But there are basic things that you would find in every Jewish wedding when it's done according to the religion and not
I'm
like
very, very curious about this.
yeah. So the first thing when you come up to a wedding, you will always see something which we call the chuppah. A chuppah, yeah, the chuppah. So it's basically how do you translate it?
I don't know what the exact, but it's that arch thing, right? That they stand under.
Yes, it's not necessarily an arch. It's usually it could be technically it was a piece of cloth with four poles holding it, and you have four people basically holding the poles, and the piece of cloth is stretched upon the couple and their parents and close family, could be brothers, and the rabbi, and that's where the actual wedding takes place. So obviously these days It's not just a.
And canopy. That's what we say in English.
Oh, wow, that's a great word. Yeah.
Been
So
living over.
obviously,
I'm married under a canopy. Don't worry, Papa.
yeah, really?
Yeah.
Nice. So, technically, it could be just a simple piece of cloth, but obviously these days a wedding is such a big event, so it is, with flowers, and it's usually such a big deal, and all the venues that, hold weddings have beautiful ones, some in the middle of a lake or whatever. So you know what I'm talking about, and I've actually seen similar stuff also in Christian weddings, according to some movies, rather than something formal that I can tell you. But it's pretty symbolic, and I can tell you in a second what. But at the end of the day, what you see is there's like a white cloth on the floor leading to the chuppah, leading to that area. And the ritual goes like all the guests are waiting on both sides of this cloth. It's like a road leading to the chuppah, and then the DJ or whatever announces that the groom usually is the one that they see first. The groom is accompanied by his parents, right? While he's doing that, the brothers and sisters of the bride and the groom are waiting under the chuppah together with the rabbi, and then the groom comes out and everybody's kind of cheering and everything, and he goes all the way in, and then the bride is announced, and the bride is super, like, both obviously are important, but the bride is even on an elevated level than the groom, I would say. The bride is like the peak of the event. The bride coming out is like everybody's cheering. You would never see the other way around. You would never see the bride coming out first and then the groom. It's always the groom first. He's waiting for her. So she's walking down the aisle with her parents, right? At the middle of the way, her parents leave her and they walk up on their own, go under the chuppah, and she's standing there. The groom comes down to her, covers her face with this veil. In Hebrew, it's called the hinumah. He covers her face, and that's a remembrance for the Jacob and Leah and Rachel, the story, and we can go into that if needed. He covers her face, and they walk up together. I have to tell you, I'm telling you this, and I'm all goosebumps. Really, being at a wedding, at a Jewish wedding, is considered a very important mitzvah, a commandment, both because you're making the groom and the bride happy, which is considered extremely important to make them happy on the day of their wedding, but also it's a huge blessing for if you don't have a partner, it's a huge blessing you will get a partner, and especially if you drink from the wine that the bride has drank from the same glass. But if you are married and you're at a wedding, it's also a blessing for a fruitful marriage and many years to come. So then they go up and they stand, and there's like an order of how they stand under the chuppah, and the rabbi gives a specific set of blessings. Sometimes they give a little bit of a sermon about what's happening now, and they connect whether to the place that we're at or the date that we're at or whatever. They give their own little spiel, but there's a specific set of blessing called the 7 blessings that you're supposed to read out, and then so I just don't know how many details I can go on and on. And then the groom shows something which is called the Ketubah. The Ketubah is like a deed where he says that he's obligated to provide his wife with everything that she needs, and he gives this to his bride, and she gives it to her mother for safekeeping, right? We know the mother-in-law will keep it, right? So that's one thing. And then there's the ring thing that he puts on her finger. Technically, according to Judaism, if a ring is put on the finger and it's worth the rabbi actually asks the audience, or asks if the ring is worth a dime. Is it worth a dime? If it's worth a dime, then the ring is worthy of being worn by this bride. And technically, a Jewish couple is considered married if this ring is put on her finger willingly and there are witnesses. And that's like the basic requirement to be married. Everything else is in addition. And so after he puts the ring and he blesses her, we finish with something which is extremely important. The groom says, if I forget Jerusalem, I will forget my right hand, my tongue will stick to my mouth, something like that. I can find out the actual translation of it, because every groom would say that in every wedding for, I don't know, since the destruction of the Second Temple, because right after he finishes saying that, he needs to step on the glass that's on the floor. He needs to break the glass, which is in remembrance of the destruction of our temple. And so I keep mentioning this because it's very important to know that all the Jews all around the world, in every Jewish wedding, would always remember the destruction of the Second Temple and yearning to go back to Jerusalem. If I forget Jerusalem, may my right hand be forgotten. Right? So it's every groom in every Jewish wedding throughout the last 2,000 years would say the same things. And that's freaking unbelievable.
That is fantastic.
Yes.
So what are some of the promises or things they say during the ceremony? Are there any set things that they promise or counsel they give or anything?
Yes. Especially in that thing that we call Ketubah. Ketubah is from the word Katuv. Katuv is written. So it's like an agreement. It's like a formal commitment that the groom is saying, and the rabbi actually reads out of it in front of everybody else. It's like a public commitment that I will feed her, I will give her and take care of all her needs. Okay? There is a financial amount that the groom is saying in case of a divorce that he is committing to pay to the woman if a divorce happens, or and usually this amount, I'm just gonna say it as a side note, usually that amount is not enforced. Usually. Sometimes it is, especially in rabbinical courts, but in this secular society, I would say it's not enforced. But we take it seriously, and at the end of the day, it's to provide the wife with all her physical, emotional, and spiritual needs by the groom.
That is amazing. I love that.
I have to bring you to at least one wedding, because there's nothing like seeing it in action. It's so amazing.
Yeah. Well, you know what? When things settle down, I'm gonna get there.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, we'll do that again. So that is right. That's great. So you want to hear a little bit?
Yeah, we want to hear about the LDS.
All right. And to do that, maybe it would be helpful to talk a little bit about American or, the other Christian beliefs about marriage, because their ceremonies are different than ours. Okay? Mm-hmm. So in a traditional Christian wedding over here, they would have the priest that would be in the front, and you'd have the two sides, which is very similar, and they have the bride's guests on one side and the groom's guests on the other, and there's an aisle that goes up to where the ceremony takes place, and the groom's already there, so a lot of these things are similar, and the bride comes in and they have the bridal music, dun, da, da, and the bridal march, and she walks up, and and they have a ceremony where they sometimes exchange vows and rings and that. So that's kind of a generic wedding like you would have in over here. Now, in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, things are different than that. Still wedding, still marriage, right? But we would differentiate two terms. We have what we call a civil marriage and a sealing, temple sealing. Okay? A civil ceremony is when you abide by the laws of the land. You have your wedding certificate, your marriage license, and you go through some ceremony with the justice of the peace or even a preacher or a pastor or a bishop or something. But in that ceremony, you are married legally, but till death do you part, which is a common phrase in many of the marriage ceremonies in Christianity. Okay? So, and I most would say that's a great thing because you're going to be together all the way to the end of your life. Well, the difference for us is a civil ceremony is till death do you part. A temple wedding or a temple sealing is for time and all eternity. That union is sealed not only for this life, but for the life to come. That as we go on to the other side after we die, that marriage is still in force. So that's a significant difference. Okay? So in the United States and several other countries, the law of the land recognizes a temple wedding as a legal ceremony. So that one ceremony would provide the marriage legally and eternally, if you will. Some countries do not, like Sweden. When I lived in Sweden, Sweden doesn't recognize temple weddings as legally binding. So in that case, people will actually have a civil wedding and then go to the temple for the sealing. So they do both, so they can be legally, according to the law of the land, and then sealed for eternity. Okay? But for the purposes...
Bill, just a quick question about eternity here. Does your church believe in reincarnation?
Reincarnation? So
No, that people come back over how's it called? Isn't it called reincarnation?
Reincarnation is what that's called.
Yeah.
We do not believe in that, but we do believe that the family perpetuates beyond the veil, is what we would say. That our wife, our children can all be sealed together, and we can live in that family relationship for eternity.
So as souls in
as
heaven,
resurrected beings with bodies and everything else.
Oh, okay, but not on earth.
Not on earth until after the whole plan is over, which we're going to talk about the plan at some time, right? But yes, wherever we are after the resurrection, we would be with our family if we've remained faithful to the covenants. And that's a big part of a temple ceremony, is it's a covenant not only between a husband and a wife, bride and a groom, but with God. So that union is three-way, if you will. Husband to wife, husband and wife to God in that union. Okay? So for our purposes here, let me go through what that ceremony looks like, if you will, because it's interesting, and there's a lot of parallels to what you said and some things that are different. A temple ceremony is very, very simple. There's no money. There's no charge. There's nothing like that. It's not very long. Many will have what we call a reception afterwards somewhere else, and those can even be fairly free because you could do it at a church and the church doesn't charge you anything for it, but some would choose to have more elaborate receptions, right? But the temple ceremony itself is no charge, simple sacred and short. So what will happen is the bride and the groom will go to the temple, and inside the temple there's actually a room that's called the bride's room. It's elegant as it's crazy elegant, but it has mirrors and counters, and that's where they can get dressed into their wedding gown, and their mom can be there and help them with everything, and the groom doesn't get that, right? Because really the bride gets all the attention, as it should be, I think. And so she gets all dolled up, and they wear white clothing. The groom wears white clothing. And we also have some ceremonial clothing that we wear. Okay? Part of that includes a veil for the bride. And then what will happen is the two of them will then come into a sealing room. And we showed a picture of a sealing room on another podcast that has an altar in the middle and the guests are around it. And the couple will sit at one end, and the officiator, the sealer is what we call him, will then spend a few minutes just giving counsel and advice. And that is all kind of like what you said, something about the place, about the time, about them, about their family, things that he's found that are really beautiful in marriage that he would like to share with them. So it's kind of informal, if you will. And when he finishes that, which is not very long, usually 4 or 5 minutes of that, he will ask the groom to accompany his bride to one side of the altar where she will kneel down. And then he will go to the other side of the altar and he will kneel down. Now what's interesting is this altar is in the middle, okay? And they're kneeling and they're facing each other. On the walls behind them on both sides are mirrors, big giant mirrors. And so when you have two mirrors that oppose each other, when you look at them, you can see image after image after image. It's like it projects.
Yeah, countless reflections.
Countless reflections. And what we talk about there is one side is a representation of all of the generations before you that came to this point of the altar, and the other side is all the generations in the future that will come from this.
Oh, wow, that is beautiful.
Yeah, and it gives you this eternal perspective of that you're a link in this chain of all of your ancestors to you, and then from you to all of your posterity that will come after.
Wow, that is beautiful.
It is. It's great. And then you take each other by the hand over the altar, and then the sealer goes through a very, very specific ordinance, and there are witnesses as well that are required. By law, yes, but by God, because this sealing is done before God and the people there and the witnesses who will then sign their name that they witnessed this, okay? And the ceremony consists of asking each one if they are willing to accept this person as their husband or wife for time and all eternity, and all the obligations and all the things that go with that. And unlike other civil ceremonies, there's you don't say I do, you say yes, because they would say, are you doing this of your own free will? Very similar to what you talked about. And you say, yes, I am. And then they would ask the bride that, and they'd ask them both that same thing. And then once they do that, then he will pronounce upon them the sealing, that they are sealed and have all the blessings. And you will find this interesting, because one of the phrases they will use is all the blessings of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
Wow.
And we'll have another whole thing on the Abrahamic covenant and what that means and the posterity part of that. But they're brought into that covenant in that sealing. that they have the blessings of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob to inherit all of these things. And it's all predicated on faithfulness, that we are faithful to each other and faithful to God to enable that power of that sealing and those covenants and the blessings associated with it to not only be in force in this life, but throughout eternity. So it's a beautiful thing.
It is. So who's invited to like, I understand that the civil event is bigger. You kind of invite more guests to it, and the temple is more minimalistic.
Right. And most of us over here don't have a civil ceremony before. So this is it, right? And so it'll be basically close family and friends. So basically, when you get a wedding, I could show you one. I have one from my niece. But you'll have an invitation to the reception, but you might also get a little card insert that says you're also invited to the sealing, because there's a limited number of people that can be in the sealing. So it's just very,
do
very...
people get offended if they're not invited to the sealing and stuff like that? Do you get all these things?
If they do, then they don't understand, but I imagine it happens. It is also true that because it takes place inside the temple, if you are not a member of the church or not a member of the church in good standing, that you wouldn't qualify for a recommend to get into the temple, you can't go.
Wow.
And this
they're actually verifying this?
Yeah. And this creates some angst for especially brides. If their parents aren't members of the church and they're getting married and they have to tell their parents you're not allowed to come into the ceremony, you can imagine how difficult that would be.
Wow.
So in that case, many couples will choose to have a civil ceremony so that everybody can be there before or after the sealing. Okay? To make it better than that. But it's fairly short.
Is the saying that I see often in movies, is this where, like, if anybody has any objection or forever hold your peace, is that like from a Catholic wedding, or
that's more of a mainstream Christian thing? We don't do that in our ceremonies. Mm-hmm. If they had an objection, they would have had it out long before we entered into the temple. But it's interesting too. I wanted to follow up.
In your case, it's even more crucial because it's for eternity than people.
For eternity. Yeah, you don't mess with eternity, right?
Yeah.
So the rings are not part of a temple wedding. Mm-hmm. Not even part of it. So what often will happen is, following the sealing, when everything's all done, the sealer will say, "This is not part of the ceremony, but do you have rings that you want to exchange?" And they can do that then. Or some will have a ring ceremony after that so that everybody they want can be there, and they'll do that sometimes. And very often at the sealing, after it's completed, the sealer that does the ordinance has a certificate that's been signed by everybody that says you're now sealed. He gives that to the bride, mm-hmm. and then to the bride's mother for safekeeping. Very similar to what you do, because mother-in-law won't lose it.
Right. That's for sure. That's for sure.
So
that is profound. That is interesting. And are there any specific blessings that need to be said in the temple beyond the Abraham and Isaac and Jacob?
There are more things that they say in the ceremony, but they're all related to, in your faithfulness, you will be able to love, honor, and all those things that you would expect.
But they're all focused on the couple, basically?
They're all focused on the couple and their relationship to God and what blessings are possible through them and their posterity. Yeah.
Right. So the reason I'm asking is because the 7 blessings that I told you about is there's an order to it. There's a reason that there are 7 blessings, but they're not only related to the couple themselves. The 7 blessings, they start with the blessing of the wine, right? And then the groom needs to also provide his his new wife enable her to drink, already starting at that point in time to kind of take care of her because she's not drinking on her own. He needs to give her a sip, right? Or her mother needs to give her a sip. Actually, let me correct that. At the beginning, her mother gives her the first sip, and then later on, the groom would give her. And that also symbolizes the transition from being taken care by the mother to now being taken care by the husband. And then the second blessing focuses on the creation of man, which is what we've spoken about in previous episode. And then it talks about the creation of man in the image of God. And only then it talks about the blessings of the couple. We're at the fourth. Then the fifth talks about rejoicing for Jerusalem. It basically connects the fact that this couple is not just merely a standalone couple. They're a part of the people of Israel. So it's actually building the nation of Israel. So there's rejoicing for the fact that the nation of Israel has now a new home and remembering Jerusalem. And then there's a blessing for continued happiness between the couple, and the finishing blessing basically talks about may God bless them for the future, a groom and a bride. But it's interesting because in the blessings you have the creation of man. The Jerusalem is an important aspect of the Jewish people, and how the fact that these two are now forming a Jewish home that's part of the Jewish people, and only then we're talking about the couple as a couple.
Here is a fascinating thing, and we talked about this in another episode where we talked about the temple, right? The sealing is in the temple. It's like the culminating event. But what do we do in the rest of the temple? We learn about the creation. We learn about man and the fall. And we learn about all of those things that happen. So it's what you do in your ceremony is like what happens in the temple all the way through. And you, just as you said, these blessings of the sealing happen after all those others have already been discussed.
Yes.
So it is very similar.
It's very similar, and it's interesting to see because there's it's the understanding that this is a part of something, and the thing with the mirrors also is fascinating. Talking about the part being a link in a chain, and yeah, I love it. I love it. I think it's quite amazing, and only after the glass is broken, then music starts, and everybody's happy, and everybody's running towards the chuppah and embracing the groom and the bride, and then everybody moves on to the actual venue where the dancing and the food and everything.
I cried like a baby after that ceremony when I got married.
When you got married.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. You know, one of my sons, he married a girl that was not a member when they first met, but she joined the church, and there's a guideline that says you have to be a member at least a year before you can go to the temple, because it's like going to university. Temple is like high end, right? So they give them a year to kind of be solid in the fundamentals, and then you get to the temple. So they got married before the year was up. So they had a civil ceremony when they first got married. And before they ended up going to the temple to be sealed, for that part, they already had a child. Okay? So it's a year or so later, you know. Fascinating thing about this sealing. So when we went to the temple, and they did like we just talked about, kneeled on either side of the altar and made that covenant and were sealed together. But then they brought their baby in and put the baby with them on the altar and sealed that child to them as their part of their posterity for eternity. That is a beautiful thing.
Wow.
No, because it's a family. It's not just a couple, you know. And so that was a beautiful thing to be there that day. So
Yeah, that's no doubt about it. It's pretty amazing. And is the bride also considered the main person of the event?
All of us would say yes. I mean, is the ceremony wording any different? No. Is the way they treat them different? Yes. I think that we all agree that a bride should have all the respect of a bride, you know? And
Yeah, yeah. It's
absolutely.
it's fascinating because it's like it's like an informal acceptance of the fact that the bride is the main event. Like the groom is considered as a king in that day, and the bride is considered like a queen on
We,
that day. But
we
our
use that same
sages,
wording, actually. We
yeah.
do. Yeah.
So our sages used to say that, the bride is the heart of the house, is the center of the house, and she's treated like that. The woman, not the bride. The woman itself is the center and the center, the heart of the house, and so she's treated like that. And on her day, the day of the wedding, it's specifically important. And just to connect it with the chuppah that I mentioned, the cloth and the four poles, we don't have the Holy Spirit as Christianity has that term, but we do have something. I think I mentioned it. It's something. I'm. I don't want to use the word similar because it's not similar, but in terms of just conceptualizing it, it could be conceptualized as similar. Something which we call Shekhinah. Shekhinah is the essence of God. It's like the spirit of God. That Shekhinah means shochen, residing. That's residing somewhere. And according to the tradition, it's residing on top of the chuppah. It's also, the bride is also a symbol of the Shekhinah. So you really want to take care of her. And the chuppah, the reason there are like four people holding it and it's open from all directions, it's also talk about Abraham. It's also kind of remembering that Abraham's tent was open from all directions because he was very welcoming to everybody. Everybody's welcome to come inside. So it's like you're not blocked from any direction. Everything is open. You can come in from whatever direction. It's
Yeah.
beautiful symbolism as well.
It is. It's
All
amazing.
right. Yes, it is amazing. All right, I think we had a very, very moving and interesting episode. I gotta, calm down my goosebumps because it was pretty amazing. Uh, and so, yeah, we're thankful for everybody for listening, and I highly encourage you, listeners, comment on our videos. Let us know what you would like us to talk about and share. I think the resemblance and the comparison between the two is highly interesting as well. So just let us know, and we promise we'll take it seriously.
Been wonderful.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Bill, for yet another wonderful episode. Thanks so
Thank
much.
you, Ariel.